Hey everybody, this is Maha,
And this is Dylan.
and we're the host of See, That Wasn't Too Hard 2.0. And we're going to talk to you today about everything from continuous improvement down to, well, personal improvement, actually. Isn't that right, Dylan?
Heck yes.
So, Dylan, today's topic is actually something that's been in the news lately, and I wanted to discuss it with you because we seem to have very, let's say, polarizing opinions on it. And I like it. I like it because it shows discussion and it shows everything around the topic that a lot of people can either relate to or even argue themselves. So today's topic is going to be quiet quitting. And we're just going to start off maybe by understanding each other's perspectives or understand each other's definition of quiet quitting. What do you think?
Heck yes. Maha, how about you start?
So quiet quitting, at least for me, has been like this elusive term that's been floating around the internet. Everyone is talking about it. Um, and it seems like everyone has a very different perspective on how it looks like for them, which is kind of funny actually for me. So when I first read it on the Wall Street Journal, the definition is basically that people still do their jobs, still commit to their job descriptions or what is necessary basically to deliver their role. They just don't go above and beyond, which is something kind of interesting because that relates still, I guess, to the job description, but maybe not too much. What do you think, Dylan?
Yeah. There's also on some fast moving social media a kind of a response of working your wage, which is a alternate, less Wall Street journal-y way of saying the same thing,
And
with
Bloomberg.
less of a negative association.
Okay. So working your wage to you means kind of the same thing, right? Not going above and
Yeah,
beyond.
the pendants on the internet, I think, excuse me, the pedants on the internet equated it. It's just doing your job, doing only your job.
Yeah, but why is it such a problem, you think? Why is it a problem to just do your job?
Mhm. Yeah. What are your thoughts? What are some examples?
Hey, don't throw the ball back at me. I threw it at you.
I gotta have something to argue with though. So I want what's the default position? What's the um what would be uh well, first, why does it seem absurd?
Yes, that's kind of that's a
Mhm.
good spin off on the question. So Dylan, why do you think it actually seems absurd to just do your job?
I think from a perspective of many people who have a well-defined role, like especially hourly workers,
Mhm.
uh, just doing their job is exactly what they do. They come, they assemble lawnmowers or sub-assemblies, or they follow a procedure, or they cut checks, or they balance
Sheets.
books, or they call people and read off of a sales script, or on and on and on. These kind of these standard work, they know what they're doing and it's mostly the same every day.
Mhm.
The term has no meaning because that's what they already do.
No, if you even want to start thinking about how productivity is measured on an economic perspective or economic level, productivity is measured through how much work you're able, much quality work you're able to churn within your job. And that's been actually going down for quite a while too. And one of the reasons why quiet quitting has been such a hot topic actually connects back, interestingly enough, to productivity and how productivity just keeps going down even before the pandemic. And the pandemic just hasn't even really made it any better. Are people
Mm-hmm.
doing more work, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic? The answer is yes. Um, are they really generating kind of the same sort of productivity that used to be generated back in those 50s, 60s, and 70s? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
So people have been trying to name, I would say, something And what they found out is that maybe people have been kind of not really putting, let's say, a tremendous amount of effort into what they're doing. It's either due to burnout, either due to not understanding what is needed of them, funny enough, because when you sometimes have a blank job description or kind of a blank sheet, i.e., your title is data analyst, but then you do um, you do database work and you do everything kind of in the background, you start maybe even kind of losing focus of what your delivery points are and
Right.
why you're there,
Mhm.
which is kind of funny because that's actually something that's been on the rise. People feeling disconnected from their jobs, people feeling like they don't understand how their role connects with the overall strategy or anything else like that. A great book for a lot of people in this case would actually be Even Bullshit Jobs. Yes, that's the title. No censorship. Um, which actually talks about how we just keep creating jobs that we think are important, putting people in them, people discovering their bullshit, and then people just kind of either losing interest or just not understanding how what they're doing fits the whole machinery and the whole strategy of the company. So,
Yeah, I
so
like that phrase. People
yeah,
for, oh, I'm gonna mess it up, but people forgetting or not understanding how their job impacts the whole machinery. I think that is a problem that I think in a lot of teams.
it is.
Uh,
And it's a problem actually. Like if you look at some of the Gallup reports when it comes to how engaged, quote unquote, employees have been, that's been going down for the past 10 years. And
mhm,
a part of their engagement is not just a dissatisfaction with what they're doing, but it's actually a dissatisfaction with how they connect into the overall machinery,
mhm.
for example, and what their how their roles are even significant for the company. Like, if you were just like you said, you're building the engine for the lawnmower. If you want to go back to that example, you would know exactly why you're building that engine, because without that engine, the lawnmower is not going to work, right? If you're
Yeah,
the one kind of sharpening the edges of the lawnmower, that doesn't make sense. But if you were the one
right.
kind of building the parts for it as well, you understand again what sort of part of delivery you're doing. But if you're just, again, and I'm going to go back to the same example of a data analyst, because that is a title without any real job description behind it as well. You're doing a lot of things. You're doing a lot of thought
We,
work, right?
or we could poke fun at Sean and say a chief vision officer. Well,
Oh my
what do
God.
they do?
Okay. Hash, hashtag Sean Visionary.
Hashtag vision. Yeah.
Um,
So this is what I think is the biggest distinguishing factor. And
okay.
push back on me. To me, quiet quitting has the most meaning for people who operate in that second kind of job. People who are not cared to show up and like follow a script,
Mhm.
but people who are paid to care. People who need to solve problems. Whatever the problem coming in is, you get to solve it. I was reminded of there was an interview with someone who started a barbecue restaurant, and he was talking about his time at a major investment bank,
Mhm.
and he was a manager, a middle manager, and he realized a bunch of customer accounts got miscredited or something, and he was the only one in the hot seat, in the accountability, the problem solving role, and so he stayed up till 2 correcting all of them because his team just that wasn't a realistic expectation of them.
Mhm.
And I think every company has people who are paid to care. I mean, the CEO is kind of the default person.
Technically, we
They
pay them
have
to
to
do that.
care, right? um
But then, can I also counter argue with that? Because for you, this care that you're talking about actually kind of circles back to accountability, which is again why CEOs
right.
are supposedly paid so high. It's not just about them caring, but it's about them getting all the brunt work if anything goes wrong. So accountability as
I
well.
Yeah, I think caring and accountability are just like two sides of the same piece of paper that
Interesting.
you're there to solve problems. If the problems don't get solved, it's on you.
Yep.
Um,
I like that.
and so the question is, what happens when someone who's paid to care doesn't care anymore? And I think that's the use of a term like quiet quitting, the event when someone who has a role where they're paid to care
Mhm.
turns into someone who just shows up and does what they're told and keeps the lights on.
Well, not only does it keep the light on, but I'll even argue the accountability piece, because it seems like you're still accountable for the work at the same level. You're just not giving it the same amount of care. But is it,
This is
isn't that
yeah, this
dangerous?
is no, this is I think different. So
Okay.
if I think accountability is a challenge
Hmm.
and an acceptance of that challenge. If someone says, um, half the invoices we sent out last month were incorrect.
Hmm. That's not you not
If,
caring, or is it?
well, if you take the accountability for saying, I'm going to take that down to only 20% of the invoices we sent out next month, only 20% are going to be incorrect. And you take that challenge and you own it and you do whatever it takes to fix and solve that problem.
Okay.
That's someone who cares, like intrinsically. You're not going to do that if you are just paid to do stuff. If you're just paid to do stuff, you're not going to solve that larger problem. You're not going to go to root cause. You're just going to say, this is how I do invoices. What would you like me to do differently? And you just defer that accountability up and just don't accept it.
I like that, because you're talking about, so the interesting aspect now that I see is that you're talking about quiet quitting from the perspective of leadership, which is which is intrinsically different than how I'm talking about it too. So I love this
Yeah.
discussion, by the way. And see, this is kind of the
Mhm.
interesting thing, because if I talk about it from the employee's perspective, the employee is
Mhm.
going to be like, okay, what's the minimum threshold? What is, or the even the minimum threshold, or what's the maximum of the
Mhm.
number of invoices that I can screw up, for
Right.
example,
Right.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they keep it within the safe space. They're not going to give you a hundred if they can't give you 100, basically, but they're also not going to stay until 2 a.m. working on it, because
Fixing
they
them.
don't fixing them, because they don't see that as their accountability.
Right.
They
Well,
don't see that as their accountability, again, because they do believe that accountability should be higher up. That is actually a good one.
yeah. I think it's not necessarily a manager and employee distinction. I can think
Really.
of lots of individual contributors that have an accountability mindset that
Mm.
think this
I
is a
need to be
problem.
accountable for every. Yep.
I'm gonna make sure this gets fixed.
Yep. I agree.
Um, and
Continuous
I can think
improvement.
of managers that don't, right? That have never taken accountability. This is one reason we talked about the racy in season one.
Mhm.
This is one reason why people argue for multiple A's on a need, because they don't, if they're on an A, they don't want to be accountable. They're
Mhm.
going to try to argue for someone else to be accountable as well, so that nobody is accountable.
Yep.
Um, so I think ultimately quiet quitting for me, when I've heard this term, when it's resounded for me, is from the perspective of someone who
Mhm.
treats their job as some like accountability, someone who cares,
Mhm.
someone who's just going to get it done, whatever needs to be done, they're going to get it done,
Mhm.
to step back from that commitment and just step into a,
Yes.
I'll do what you want me to do. Tell me what you want me to do.
So
How does that feel, Maha?
abiding by the job description, which, and
Yeah.
which again, in a lot of these jobs where the job description just simply cannot be abided by, is quite a hard distinction. So that's why, from kind of the employee perspective, from a lot of people that I know that have actually managed to do that, they're like, yes, there are problems that we're going to solve, that we're going to take the accountability that is necessary to run and maintain sort of job. But if you're asking me to be hyper creative, and if you're asking me to give a lot of time and effort into something, so it's actually kind of a creativity problem solving perspective, right? If I'm not having the, let's say, right environment for me to do that, i.e., it's a difficult environment with a lot of red tape that I need to go through. And at the same time, if I'm not having the right support or the right incentives, then why should I do it? It's actually them looking at kind of a cost benefit analysis of some sort, of saying, is this really worth my time? Is this really worth the effort I'm about to put in? Is this obviously me staying up till 2 a.m., ruining my day, ruining something else? Is this really worth it? So for me, I think quiet quitting is actually employees going through a cost benefit analysis of a some sorts and realizing that maybe the cost is just too high of a risk compared to the profit that they would get, either either when it comes to pay, right? You know, I'm not gonna get a promotion because the company's not doing well or something like that, even though they have the money, or I'm not gonna get the right recognition, or I'm not, you know, actually this is gonna impact my marriage, and I care more about my marriage. I don't want to be like all these guys that are that reach a certain point and get divorced. And if I want to talk about, like, again, the cost benefit analysis, there's just so much going on in people's personal lives right now compared to even 20 years ago. And you know this as a parent as well.
Yeah. Let me step it back. Okay. So why do people accept accountability challenges? Like, what's in it? If someone says, I just need this problem to be solved, get it done.
Yeah.
And you say, yes, I will take that on. I will run with it. What are you hoping to get? I can think of three reasons. I can think, and you just actually said them. I can think of three reasons. First, there's this kind of implicit quid pro quo where if you do a good job, you're going to get promoted.
I like the quid pro quo.
There's nothing contractual about it, but if you do great things for me, I'm going to make sure you're well compensated.
Scratch my back scratchers. Yes.
Yeah, right.
In many ways.
So that's one.
Yeah.
That's climb the corporate ladder, Rocco boy. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Second one, you like people saying nice things about you. You're going to take this, you're going to solve this problem, and everybody says, yeah, you fixed everything. You're so awesome. Right? A lot of people get a huge kick out of that.
Okay. So I'm going to just reframe that in a more positive light and say validation. And
sure, but
so
praise,
there's
right?
Yes, praise, but also validation. This is specifically validation, whether monetary or whether kind of, you know, social validation in this case, right?
Okay, if you want. Third, that you are a person who gets a kick out of helping.
There gets a kick out of solving problems.
Solving problems. Well, no, helping. So there are a fair number of these people. You see it a lot in engineering circles. Like, they just like to solve problems. They see a problem, they fix the problem. They solve a problem, they fix the problem. That's how their internal sense of value is derived.
Yeah, so that actually then is even a fourth point when you think about it, because they get a self sort of gratification, in this case, from seeing a problem being solved, not necessarily just from the perspective of praise or from the other perspective. So I would add that as point number 4, by the way, which.
Well, what was 3 then?
I don't remember anymore.
I think that was my point 3.
No.
I only had quid pro quo, yay, and you like helping.
Yeah, you like helping for me is not the same thing as liking solving problems. Maybe that's why.
Oh, okay. Same for me.
Okay.
The reason you like helping is because you like being part of the solution. You like solving the problem.
Which
So
sometimes it's just not like helping people. You don't care about, I know people that just don't care about helping the company. They just care about like solving the problem. So maybe this is my
uh,
distinction, by the way, which is
okay,
when
okay, I see.
those people, those people also because they're in the engineering circle too.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So I would say, depending on the person who's accountable, maybe one of these, if one of these, they think whatever's driving them to be accountable, if that thing disappears, and they eventually figure out, I'm not, doesn't matter how awesome I am not getting that promotion.
Yep.
They're gonna step back
Okay.
from that accountability commitment.
There we go.
And that is the action of quiet quitting. And so I think,
Instead of actually like saying, well, I'm going to push harder the next year and try to get that promotion, you just actually take a step back.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
well,
No.
so what are the three ways, or what are the ways that those three can be eliminated?
Yeah.
For the first one, if you rationally come to believe, maybe it's org changes, maybe it's a new manager, who knows?
Okay.
Hold on. Maybe it's org changes, maybe it's a new manager, maybe your manager had a change. Maybe you realize something about somebody that you didn't realize before. You figure out that that this quid pro quo that you've kind of assumed is not going to work out. It's not going to happen no matter how awesome you are.
Yeah. And then what happens is that you're kind of, what is it called? Social contract or something?
Right.
Is it?
They have broken your social contract.
Yep.
So you're off the hook.
Yep. And
and I think in previous years, such people quit and find a new role where they think
sometimes they do.
Yeah, right.
I would argue that you've got three different people in this case too, right? That actually face this. Either people that would just double down, which is kind of the old way of doing things, right? They're going to double down. They're going to work harder to get that promotion, and that managers have been using that sometimes to even, they would dangle a promotion, so you would work harder, right? And then you got the people that would just accept it, right? Say, okay, you're not gonna give me that. That's fine. I'm leaving, and then they end up like leaving or end up moving departments or trying to like again go find their value somewhere else. Go to a place that values them. And then you have a third one, which is actually kind of where the quiet quitting is, which says, fine, but I'm not leaving. I'm just not going to give you. I'm not just going to give you the work that you want for free, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of potentially where I see quiet quitting as a more global or national phenomenon is the homogenization of corporate culture, where you have
also
maybe a lot less confidence than you did in decades previous that moving is going to be any different. That changing to another large company, or I don't know, whatever in your industry, you're going to have the same barriers and the same people are going to, you're not going to get that quid pro quo deal.
Yep. But statistically speaking, people that do end up moving jobs often do end up raising their base salaries by a much higher percentage than people who do stick in companies, by the way, too. So statistically speaking, that's true. And that is an incentive even for people to just move.
Yep, this is true. I think the second one where you're in it for the praise, you're helping for the praise, and the praise stops coming. That is a thing that happens. Yep. I think sometimes that's a temporary thing. Sometimes team dynamics or interpersonal dynamics can change very quickly.
Problem
Trust is
solving.
dropped.
Yep.
People,
Sorry.
yeah, people aren't nearly as effusive in their praise when they're afraid. Um,
Or
or
my favorite one is when you constantly are the problem solver. You're the problem solver in the company, so that becomes kind of your standard.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
the standard is just, even if it's above and beyond, if above and beyond is your standard, it becomes less praisable.
right. This is very true. Maybe through your own excellent performance, you are enabling other people to take you for granted.
Yes, especially when you don't
And
talk about it too much.
yeah, deep philosophy there. And then the third one with you like providing value. Sometimes rules change, sometimes needs change, priorities change, and you might need to do a lot more operational stuff. And that happens.
Yep, and it
And
sucks.
well, yeah. And so at that point, you ask yourself, do I stop caring? I
Could you
mean,
rephrase that question?
if you are a manager and you're afraid of quiet quitting from the people who just solve problems, what can you do?
Okay, that is a good question, isn't it? So, what can we do? We can either refer back to the three different buckets, right? Or we could even start off with just, first of all, knowing your employees well enough. I would start off by knowing your employees well enough. Know your
Ah,
know your employees,
uh-huh,
know their incentives and what drives
right.
them, what drives their value, and
Mm-hmm,
and then revert back to that,
right.
and make sure that you're actually satisfying their incentives and their passions, right? So
Yeah.
I'll give an example. If your employee is looking at up for that promotion, have a discussion with that employee. Understand why they're even interested in the promotion. What does the promotion does? Is it about validation? Is it about financial incentive, or is it about something else? And actually build a nice and actual like succession plan in which that employee
Mm-hmm.
might get their incentive satisfied. On the other hand, too, if their incentive is about praise and everything else like that, it's actually really even cheap sometimes to think about that. Have a lunch and learn where these employees actually talk about their success. Put those employees on the front pages. Make sure that you, even as a manager, praise your employees to the higher ups, because that actually, even if it's, make sure that it's visible, because that visibility is what the employees might actually need from that, because maybe it's even hard for them to sometimes vocalize it, so they just need people that support them to vocalize it, right? On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, then the third type is actually kind of the tougher type, right? Because you even, let's talk about the employee that maybe is stuck on an operational work kind of side. If you're putting, you're basically, what happens if the role's changed and the employee is unhappy and you're keeping them in that role, you're just doing yourself a disservice, because you know that that employee would be more beneficial to your team or organization doing something else. So take your head out of
Well,
the, yeah, well, that's kind of it. So maybe,
so, well,
I'm gonna
okay.
finish my point though.
Okay, go ahead.
Look, I'm gonna finish my point. If you're keeping a high performer in a job that requires a lot of automation, or you're keeping a creative performer in a job that requires a lot of operationalizing, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because you know that that employee could either upskill into another role, could either even move on a special project that you could give them, because special projects, there are a lot of special projects or a lot of special work that you can actually offer them, to just give them energy on the side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or again, just accepting that the employee is just not a great fit for the role anymore, and either, number one, move, allowing them to find something that is interesting for them, either with your team or outside of your team,
Mm-hmm.
or just having a very frank discussion about their performance and about their development, and maybe even eventually let them go their development, have a very frank discussion about whether they're happy in the new, in the kind of the role change and everything else like that. and then maybe support them on finding something better for themselves, which is actually something that even Sean talked about when having to think about like letting his employees go, because that would have been the best thing for them in their career.
True.
So those are kind of my points. This is what a manager can do. And you know what? That sounds to me like the managers also having to really put their employees on the forefront, getting
Mhm.
setting time aside to know their employees and understand their incentives. You can even ask them just blankly if you cannot figure it out yourself. Just ask them, ask their colleagues, ask around. And just really, it's a great opportunity actually for managers, I think, to even reconnect with their employees in general. What do you
Mhm.
think?
Yeah, and I think this works even in a matrixed organization. We've kind of
Yep,
been talking as if, a pretty hierarchical one. Um, Organizations are pretty fluid. I think more fluid than a lot of people realize. And
I agree.
reaching across into another team and saying and helping people who are not your direct reports uh, grow up a new project, praise. You can help uh, a lot of people.
Yep. And
So,
the interesting thing about projects is that you can just sometimes, this is why I think it's a great way of just reconnecting with your employees, because you can just ask your employees about what sort of work would they want to do, and they will have sometimes problems
mhm,
that they want to solve that they just didn't have the right opportunity to solve. So you're actually really problem solving for your organization by
mhm.
re-incentivizing your employees. So folks, thank you for joining us on, see, that wasn't too hard 2.0 and on our little rant and discussion about quiet quitting. We're sure that you have a lot of opinions yourselves and a lot of stories that you would like to share around that, whether from a management side, from an employee side, or even from an organizational side. So please drop us some DMs and comment on, and drop us a few comments as well. Don't forget to follow us, click like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast channels or on YouTube. And until then, see, that wasn't too hard.
Wasn't too hard.